Hello and welcome to the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, registered dietitian, running coach, marathon runner, and mom. This season, we're breaking down running's biggest trends, hot topics, and myths, and turning them into practical nutrition and training advice you can actually use every day. Let's get into it. Hey there. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to just take a minute to invite you to a free webinar that I'm hosting on Wednesday, May the 6th. It's my Fuel Smarter, Run Stronger webinar. If you are stuck in a running rut, if you are constantly battling food cravings, if you just cannot seem to get any changes on the scale or with your body composition, and you're tired of bonking on your long runs and raiding the kitchen every night like a hungry trash panda, then I really want you to save a spot and join me live for this workshop. In it, I'm going to share with you why most of the nutrition advice that you hear online is just wrong when it comes to runners. And honestly, why a lot of the nutrition advice that you hear from family, friends, or maybe even your doctor is not great advice if you're a runner. And I'll also be sharing with you the key strategies that you need to really level up your running performance, have better quality workouts, start getting closer to your PR goals, and most of all, stop constantly battling cravings and feel like food is just so complicated, so confusing, and so overwhelming. So once again, this is my Fuel Smarter, Run Stronger webinar. It's on May the 6th, and you can save your spot for this event at the link in the show notes. All right, hope to see you there. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I, of course, am your host, Stephanie Natchuk, and today I want to talk about why we are always fighting about fueling. Why has the internet become so rife with hot takes and hot topics, and why is literally every bloody thing in nutrition these days a source of controversy? And so this topic has been on my mind for a little while now. The last couple of weeks, I've kind of been thinking about, how to turn this idea into a podcast episode. Leading up to the Boston Marathon a couple of weeks ago, my social media feed that weekend was just swamped with hot takes around race day fueling, hot takes around carb loading. Everything you've been told is wrong about carb loading. You're carb loading way too much. No, you're carb loading way too little. No, you should be doing this. No, you should be doing that. Like, just so much information. And the individuals making these posts, these creators who are putting together this post, I don't know who a lot of these people are kind of off the top of my head. I did not spend a lot of time doing a deep dive into whether or not the information that was being shared is good, bad, etc. But like, I'm just scrolling through my social. I didn't run the Boston Marathon, right? I was not searching out information about how to fuel for the Boston Marathon, right? But the nature of the algorithm giving you content, it thinks that you're gonna find entertaining is just the world that we live in, right? And so every couple of posts, seeing more of these different hot takes and controversial takes and that sort of thing, specific to this event, like, had me feeling a little bit stressed and overwhelmed. And like, I teach this for a living, right? Like, I am a sport dietitian. I create carb loading plans and fueling plans for athletes every single day. And I'm like going through this like, oh my gosh, I can only imagine how the average runner feels who maybe isn't walking into that marathon, if they are running Boston, walking into that marathon without a fueling plan or a fueling strategy, right? Like, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a lot of confidence in how to fuel, and you're seeing these posts, a day or two before the race, and it's all this different information swirling around, like, that is incredibly stressful, right? So then, just as I'm about to record this podcast, I opened up Threads, and there was some poor guy on there who was getting just absolutely ratioed. And I don't know if the kids today still use the term ratioed, so I might be dating myself a little bit using the term ratio, getting ratioed over. He was sharing his thoughts on how he thinks that so many runners are probably over fueling their races because he didn't, or did something different, or whatever the specifics were, and he felt great. So he did XYZ, he felt really good. So he thinks that all these other runners are doing their fueling wrong. And rightly so. I mean, people were coming for him in the comments, but it was just like one of these, it was just one of those moments that I'm like, okay, this is the problem, right? It highlights one of the major reasons why nutrition can feel so hard is that everyone has an opinion, and those opinions are usually centered around what works for them as an individual or what they believe is working for them as an individual. And what we have to remember is that nutrition is incredibly personal, right? Everything from our food preferences, right? Like what we like to eat, what we don't like to eat, the foods we enjoy, the foods we don't enjoy, culturally, what foods are common for us versus things that we don't eat or don't get exposed to, and even nutrition recommendations. So, when we're talking about things like protein targets, or we're talking about carb loading, or we're talking about recovery nutrition or calorie needs, right? All of these things that we're talking about are very specific to the individual. So, when someone gets on social media and says, well, I did great carb loading with 300 grams of carbs per day, anybody who's eating more than that is doing it wrong and overfueling. Well, that amount, I mean, you have to be in a pretty petite, a pretty small body size for that to be kind of in line with what nutrition science recommends for carb loading. But if you are a very small bodied runner, then that amount of carbohydrate might be pretty close to what your needs are. Like that might not be too bad, right? On the other hand, if you are a much larger runner, that is a fraction of what you should be getting in for your carb load, right? It's based on weight. And that's like, for protein and for carb loading and for energy requirements, all of those things, these are all completely moving targets depending on you, how much you're training, what distance you're running, what the time goal you have for that event, right? How long you're going to be out there for, right? There's a huge difference in fueling for a 90-minute half marathon or a 3-hour half marathon, right? And the 90-minute half marathoners might have a lot of opinions about what works for them with fueling for a 90-minute half marathon that cannot necessarily be extrapolated to those who are running for 3 hours. And same goes with marathon running, right? The fueling strategies that work well for someone who's running very fast time is going to look different. And we have to stop trying to compare apples to oranges when it comes to fueling and not assume, again, that the same recommendations are going to work for everyone. Nutrition is very personal. Now, the problem comes down to nutrition being so personal that in some instances, it can start to feel like a core part of a person's identity. When someone has aligned very closely with a certain way of eating and made it a very integral part of who they are, when someone attacks or when someone questions or when someone has something different to say, a different perspective about that eating strategy, it can feel like an attack, right? And whether that's the case or not, whether that's the implied, whether that's meant to be that way or not, it can feel like that, right? And because this is a very personal, emotional thing, it often causes a lot of internet fights, and it just causes a lot of, friction around these conversations that I think doesn't need to be there if we are maybe avoiding making our eating strategy such a huge part of like who we are as a person. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, nutrition is very personal, and it needs to be personalized, right? So the amount of carbohydrate, like I had a client last week who, we were establishing her carb loading targets, and she said to me, oh, I saw that like in one of your Instagram posts, you had been carb loading with like 800 grams of carbs a day. Like that's so much more than my recommendation. And I just explained like, yeah, I mean, I weigh a lot more than you do. This client of mine is very petite, and, I am not. And so, it was just a difference in like, okay, this is why, and this is why somebody can say like, well, I carb load with XYZ and I feel great. It's like, well, that might be enough for you, but not for the next person. Or I see this fight every single day on the internet when it comes to protein. How much protein is too much, right? Somebody posts that they're eating 150 grams of protein per day. People are all up in the comment. That's way too much protein, blah, 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 blah. Well, for that person, it might not be. Do we know how much they weigh? Do we know how active they are? Do we know what their health goals are? Like, if we don't have all that information, we can't possibly just say from a simple social media comment or post or whatever, whether or not that is the appropriate amount. And so, like, when we start to think beyond just those blanket statements and those biases and that sort of thing, I think we can start to understand like where these issues are and sort of disconnect a little bit, I think, from the emotion that's so often tied to this. The other thing that I see a lot is that a lot of the content, a lot of the nutrition content, sort of the hot take controversy, whatever, comes from really big, but usually false assumptions. So again, assuming that everyone who runs a certain time or does things a certain way is all going to fall into the same category or sort of paint everyone with the same brush. A couple of years ago, for example, I had a very well-known running coach, and I believe he's also an exercise physiologist. I will not name names. I have one of his books. He's published a lot of books, and I even have one of them. Commented on one of my posts. I post a lot of fueling guides for different time goals and different distances for different races. Commented on one of my posts. I think it was running a marathon in maybe like 5.5 hours or 5.5 to 6 hours, something like that. And he said, to the effect, I didn't pull up the comment to share it with you verbatim, but I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But with that amount of carbohydrate, runners will weigh even more at the end of the race than when they started the race. And now the implied assumption that I am making, so like what I am taking from this comment, right, that runners are going to weigh even more than they did when they started the race by following these fueling recommendations, right? The implied assumption here is that runners who are running a, 5 or 6 hour marathon and that are quote unquote slower runners must be overweight, right? If you're going to weigh even more at the end of the race than you did at the beginning, that's a bad thing, right? Inherently a bad thing, when realistically the only reason that would ever happen is if someone is overhydrating and taking in way too much fluid and putting themselves at risk of hyponatremia, which is a bigger concern, frankly, in a race of that duration, or running for that long compared to otherwise. And that the purpose of running is or should be weight loss, right? And that, again, we're painting everyone with the same brush, right? Assuming that the people who are faster are doing everything right and the slower people are not, right? That there isn't this inherent difference in training and goals and experience and genetics and all of these things that make us different in terms of how fast we're going to finish a marathon or a half marathon, right? That it all comes down to weight. And that's the only thing that matters here, right? And so I really was negatively, I was surprised by this comment, and I was really sort of taken aback and honestly disappointed seeing this individual's other posts and seeing some of the other stuff he puts out on the internet. It kind of falls in line with a lot of the things that I see from this individual, which makes me no longer a fan of this individual. But it was just, again, like sort of these implied assumptions and painting everyone with the same brush, which I really think is a huge mistake. And as experts in this field, right, as people who are the professionals that work in this field, we need to do better at not promoting those types of ideals, right? Not promoting those sorts of biases, right? Because when we operate under these biases, right, all slow runners are overweight and should be trying to lose weight to get faster. All fast runners are doing everything right and eating enough, right? All runners are overfueling. All runners are underfueling, right? We are dramatically missing the importance of seeing each runner as a unique person who needs a personalized approach. And like, I understand that this can be hard to convey in a social media post. But I think then, as the consumers of social media, right, the person who is scrolling and taking in this information and seeing all these hot takes and controversial opinions, we need to be the ones to stop and ask, wait, like, is this post for me? Like, do I need to take this seriously before we assume that everything we're seeing applies to us or is meant for us or includes us? We have to look at all of this content and really be better at scrolling without absorbing so much of it and then feeling really frustrated and confused and overwhelmed because it's just all this different information we're seeing, right? Like, you're scrolling, you're seeing a post from me about the importance of making sure you're getting enough carbs and training with enough carbs and fueling up before your long runs, etc. And then you see the next post from the next person who's like, you should be fasting for all your long runs and you should be limiting your carbs before race day. Like, all of this stuff, right? We need to really look at the people we're taking advice from, right? Being fast does not give someone valid credentials to be giving advice to everyone out there, right? Like, if you yourself are a very talented runner, you might be able to say to someone else who is kind of in your same ballpark, well, this is what I do for XYZ. But that doesn't mean that you can give advice to every runner out there from all different walks of life. And unfortunately, like, social media is just so fake these days. Like, we're seeing more and more creators that are ultimately getting called out for being fake, right? They might be posting training times or race times or paces or whatever that like look really impressive. They're using their status as influencers to like sell stuff and promote stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all just a farce. Like, they're not doing the things that they claim to be doing. They're not running the distances that they claim to be running. They are faking it in order to promote usually like products or supplements or whatever. Or maybe they're just doping, who knows, right? Again, this is not anyone it's specific. I don't spend a lot of time in the running influencer community or looking at that kind of stuff, but you just see it more and more. I mean, there's even an Instagram page now that specifically is like checking and monitoring and like validating influencers' run times, right? Because there's just so much crap out there. The other thing is that nutrition is just one part of a huge puzzle of performance, right? So it's very easy to debate and to fight over fueling strategy and, kind of get into the weeds of what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, who should be doing what, who's eating too much, who's eating too little, who deserves to eat more, who should be eating less. Like, we can get into all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, nutrition is important, and I will, be the first to stand up and say it's incredibly important, but it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? Training and doing the right training over time helps us get faster. Are we resting and recovering? Are we getting injured all the time and we need to rehab from that and it's impacting us, right? Genetics, mental training, what supplements a person is taking, whether or not they're doping, right? All of these other things also play a role in how we perform on any given day. And when we have a great day, we can give a lot of credit to our fueling plan. And on a bad day, we might be questioning our nutrition entirely, right? Even though most of the time it's going to be nearly impossible to tease out exactly what factors were key on that particular day, right? Like, it's easy to say, well, my fueling plan was off, or I didn't eat properly, or, XYZ. Obviously, we have gut issues that can point to a fueling problem. But it's hard to sort of tease it apart. And there's all of these things that have to come together just right in order for us to have a really successful race that, it's easy to kind of say nutrition, or it's easy to take the blame off of nutrition or whatever it might be. But we just want to really remember that, like, this is just one piece of an overall, performance picture. And things like training and genetics and mental training, those are really key, and those really play a big role as well. The other big problem, and I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, this is something that I come back to a lot as a huge issue with social media these days, is that social media in general is rewarding views and hot takes, right? Not quality of information or accuracy of information. And this is one of the reasons why I am so grateful to have this podcast so that like we can really break this stuff down. We can share the nuance. We can talk about all of the ins and outs of everything because the stuff that does well on social media is attention seeking, right? It all comes down to the first 3 seconds. It comes down to the hook. It comes down to grabbing and keeping people's attention for longer. And it's like, it's so hard to be both a creator and to be a consumer of social media in that environment because what a lot of us were used to using social media for just a couple of years ago, that has shifted dramatically, right? As a user of social media, for a long time, it was a good place to get good information. And not that it still isn't, but you really have to sort through more and more bad information or more and more useless information, I would call it, before you get to stuff that's actually like helpful and valid and good. But the problem is sometimes the stuff that's useful and helpful and valid is like buried under the hot takes and the controversy and those hooks and stuff like that. So then as a creator, we have to learn how to do both, right? Have really like strong hooks that grab people's attention, gets them in, but also make sure that you've got the quality and the accuracy there to back it up as well. So it's just a challenging landscape and you really have to be able to navigate it from both ends, I think, to not have a very negative social media experience or have really negative outcomes as a result. So, attention is attention at the end of the day. And even if you have 1,000 people in your comments telling you how wrong and stupid and awful you are, like it doesn't matter, right? The post is getting eyeballs and that's the goal, right? It's view, it's watch time, it's comments, it's attention. Like that's what matters. It doesn't matter if there's nothing of quality off the back end, right? It doesn't matter if that person is actually a professional that they're talking about. Anybody can put anything on the internet and it's so hard, right? I also find that like the hot takes and alternate views are enticing to some people, right? There are some people who are really drawn to going against the grain and they're very suspicious of the general consensus, right? So if someone is coming in here and saying the opposite of what the general consensus is, even if the general consensus is very scientifically validated, they are drawn to the opposite, right? They like the alternate views, they like the controversy, they like the conspiracy theories. And so that also is gonna build sort of a fan base, again, like just because some people like that sort of idea, that sort of ideology. So at the end of the day, everyone is different. And sometimes there isn't good quality research that we can look to answer every single nutrition question we might have. In fact, there is more questions than answers around a lot of what we talk about day to day in nutrition. And the reason is that a lot of nutrition research has been done on men versus women. Women have been excluded from a lot of nutrition research over the years. Nutrition as a whole is a relatively young science, so there isn't like hundreds of years of nutrition science to pull from, right? It's very new. A lot of this is very recent that we're even getting into. Typically, women have been excluded, and a lot of research is done on populations that are easy for researchers to access. So you're looking at like students, college level athletes, right? There's a tremendous body of research on college level athletes, right? Because research is being done at universities, and who goes to universities? University athletes, right? So it's sort of like the convenience of the sample that you can draw from. And then, we know that quality research, you want to have research that's done in your specific population. We don't always have research specific to every population, right? Gender, ethnicity, training level, experience, right? All of these different things. And so we have to kind of like take what we learn from that research and do our best to extrapolate to the general population. And like this leaves opportunity for people to poke holes in things, which is totally fair. right? Like we have to be upfront about the fact that we don't have high quality research to answer every single question for every single person that we are going to interact with in the sport nutrition world, right? There probably isn't a research study that pertains specifically to you that is tested and studied people who are just like you. So it's totally fair to like poke holes in that and to say, well, we don't have research around like this specific thing for this group, right? But to replace that to say, well, then we should do this totally unvalidated thing that is completely different, but has no research to back it up. I don't know that that's productive. I don't know if that's a benefit, right? I don't know if that's a good trade-off, as opposed to being to say, okay, well, we're going to start with the research that we do have from elite athletes or, sub-elite college level athletes sort of thing, right? Competitive athletes who are going to be, a certain level of athleticism. They're going to have a certain amount of experience. They're going to be at a certain amount of training. They're going to be a certain body fat percentage and all those kinds of things. They're going to be male, small sample size too, right? And we're going to maybe take that and extrapolate it to more of like the general population. Like, yeah, okay, it isn't perfect, but it's better than saying, well, you know what, that research doesn't apply here. So we're going to do something totally different, totally off the wall. Now, sometimes you can do that and it's okay. But I think to say that like we're going to replace maybe low quality evidence with no evidence, well, on a case by case basis, perhaps. But it's tough because it leaves opportunity for, again, kind of asking questions and poking holes in things, which I think is valid, but we have to like be careful how far we push that before we're just getting scammed by, getting scammed the other direction. All right. So what can we do? If you are someone who has spent time on social media, any amount of time on social media, looking at nutrition information, you're seeing it in the algorithms, you're getting these posts fed to you, whether or not you want them doesn't seem to matter. What I want you to do, the first thing is to really like focus on looking inward, right? Be reflective about what you're doing. You know yourself best. You know what feels right to you. So don't let other people's opinions influence your confidence when it comes to fueling in a way that feels comfortable for you. And if something is making eating and feeding yourself a less positive experience, then that needs to be looked at, right? Like if you're following something and you are having a really hard time enjoying eating, enjoying fueling, you're feeling really restricted, you're feeling really like guilty and all of this negativity around your eating, like that needs to be looked at, right? Because at the end of the day, feeding ourselves and fueling ourselves should be a positive thing. We should eat food we enjoy. We should enjoy the food that we eat. And we need to have confidence in what we're doing in order for it to be sustainable. So really looking inward and spending some time reflecting, like, does this feel right to me? Do I feel like this is working and this is what's best for me? Because that inner peace with food and existing in a positive way with food, like nothing can replace the value of having that. I also want you to ask for help when you need it from the right people, right? Before we're absorbing information or stressing about every post that we see on social media that's telling us something controversial and hot takes all over the map, really like focus on curating your feed to include professionals who make you feel good and supported in your fueling journey, not guilty or frustrated or bad about yourself as a runner, but also like before you're taking a piece of information and like feeling any type of way about it, just stopping and thinking like, is this someone that I need to be taking advice from? Or is their feed full of just like kind of nasty hot takes and like controversial opinions and sort of a general air of negativity around the way that they share information? Because like, I don't know about you, but if I go to someone's page and everything is just like, yeah, just sort of the vibe is just like, everything everyone thinks is wrong. I'm smarter than everybody else. I have all the answers. Other people are wrong and stupid. Like when I see that kind of vibe on someone, like I'm an immediate no. Like I'm not here for anything like that. And so if you're like me, even if one post maybe doesn't look too bad, but I sort of look through it and I'm like, I just don't like the vibe or sort of the underlying tone if this person was talking to me to my face and they were talking to me like that to my face, I would be offended and I would probably not want to interact with this person. Like that's kind of how I think about it, right? And if you're going to be like that on social media, that's just not really for me, right? So if someone's making you feel bad and like even if you're not really aware of it, but like you sort of reflect on it, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like this person is, if they were talking to me, I would feel like they were talking down to me, then maybe that's not the right person to be taking advice from. The other thing is we have to be on the lookout constantly these days for AI generated content. Now, it's not that AI has no role in social media. I think that like there's a time and a place that AI can be helpful or useful in the work that we do. Like I'm not staunchly anti-AI like in all things, but I'm seeing more and more and more accounts now that they are just sharing chat GPT generated posts. And some of them have huge followings, huge followings. The problem though is that if you are like a chat, like AI can make mistakes. AI can give wrong, bad information. And so you don't know if that information that you're seeing now has been checked by someone? Has someone gone through that post that has a level of expertise about this topic and edited it for accuracy and for clarity? Or have they just copied and pasted? And maybe they're, with AI, you can generate a tremendous amount of social media content, right? I mean, ChatGPT can write 100 posts for you in under a minute. And so if you're just copying and pasting info like that and just rapid firing it off on social media, you can build a following very quickly, but that doesn't mean that you know what you're doing or know what you're talking about or can help people and solve their problems. And so we want to be really careful of that too, that like if you're seeing information that maybe looks okay on the surface level, but you don't know, is there someone behind that who has expertise that is like correcting and modifying and making sure that what you're actually seeing is accurate? I'd be very wary of those accounts too, because you just don't know, right? And who's got the time? I certainly don't have the time to like go through every single post that I see and like check or comment or, give my feedback, right? I'm over here making my own stuff. So at the end of the day, if you need help creating your personalized fueling plan, and if you want confidence, but you don't have it, if you are feeling stuck, if you don't know what works best for you, if you're just like totally swamped and overwhelmed with your nutrition, as you get ready for your next race, or maybe you're between races right now, then I would love for you to join my Fueled Runner program. So this program is 8 weeks in length, and it takes you step by step through what to eat when during each step of your running journey. So if you're base building, if you're in your off season, as you're getting ready for a race, and everything in between. We cover carb loading, we cover hydration and electrolytes, we cover improving body composition, we talk about confidence. We also have live Q&A calls, as well as checking in every week so that we can keep in touch and I can help to support you as you go along your way. So again, this is called the Fueled Runner program. You can get more information and join at the link in the show notes. All right, that is it for this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hope you got a few good takeaways about why nutrition is so controversial, and again, what we can do about it to still exist in social media, not have to just delete all of our social media, create a positive experience for ourselves, and really use it to help us move forward and actually become stronger and better fueled runners. All right, we'll see you back here next week. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.